What's up? Welcome to the Existential Stoic podcast. Do you wish your life was good or that you were happy? Do you struggle? Does it seem like you'll never be happy or you'll never have a good life? Or that, even when things are going good, you still just don't feel good or stuff is still wrong? Well, today we're going to talk about the paradox of a good life. I'm Danny, my buddy Randy. What's up, Randy?
Yo, Danny.
Do you ever struggle with this? Like what a good life is or happiness, and like maybe do we have the wrong idea? Is it fundamentally
It's
flawed?
it's one of those things where sometimes I feel like the harder I try, the further away I'm getting. Like I'm always trying to white knuckle it, and then I listen to the Tao Te Ching, and it's just like maybe I'm doing it all wrong.
I wonder that all the time. Like we all want to be happy and have a good life, but like, are we doing anything to contribute to that? It's funny, it always Immanuel Kant, he actually said this thing that's really funny. He said like if happiness was like the goal, nature, reason was a bad instrument to give us, basically. Like it's clearly it's not meant for happiness. And it's kind of funny when you think about it, because it is true. It's like we're these rational, we value reason so much, and yet it doesn't seem like it gets us to that place, right? Like where happiness exists because it always finds things that are wrong. It always finds problems. It always, we're always comparing outside. We're always doing these things that really make us miserable. It's really a
Mm.
conundrum.
Yeah, yeah, it's challenging. And it, like for me, a lot a lot of it has to do with like struggling for the good life. Like instead of just appreciating the good life that's here right now, I'm always planning and trying to have some good life in the future. And it's always at the
Yeah.
sacrifice of right now.
Yeah, right. That if I just work harder right now, if I just do this thing right now, then I can spend time doing the things I want, or then I can, yeah, that whole thinking is so flawed too, because you might not have that time later. But it's funny because, I have the same problem. It's like, you know, is it like this idea that it's got to be future oriented? Is that what's wrong with it? Like, we're not taught to appreciate the happiness now. We're taught to kind of, it's always some point in the future that we might get to, but if it's always going to be in the future, you're never going to get it. So it's like, what are we
Mm-mm,
doing?
mm-mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, I heard something the other day that really struck me. It said that gratitude takes the things you have and turns them into enough,
That's a good one. I like that. Yeah,
right?
because it
Because
does.
I mean, talking about struggling, I've always been struggling with like, what's enough? When is enough? How am I gonna get enough?
Yeah.
And it's just like you can already have it right now.
Yeah, I think that's the hard part. It's like you got to remind yourself every day, like the things that you have that are good and that like you've worked for, because otherwise, like you don't appreciate it's we're so quick to take for granted our
Hmm.
circumstances, our situation as normal, and then view it as deficient, right? Like as soon as you start taking it for granted, you view it as not enough and that you need more in order to be happy. And I think that's also the problem, right? Is this idea that like happiness is always being having more money, more time, more whatever, right? It's always like this adding on. I think that's like a really bad concept of happiness.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. I was thinking about that this weekend. How, so like there's this concept of money and possessions and things like that, that the more of them you have, the happier you'll be, particularly money. And money because it's just very easy to count, it's very easy to exchange for other things. It's a good medium. But then I was thinking about like before money, people so there's this concept that like money can equate to life power. There's this book, Your Money or Your Life. And basically what people do most of their life is they exchange their life for money so that they can use that money to buy them either more life later on with medicine or more enjoyment in their life. So uh but thinking before money or in the earlier parts of money, it's like really if money is equal to life force, we all only have this same life force, like this same present moment. Nobody has any more, nobody has any less. And anybody only ever has 24 hours and only has the life that they have. So like this idea that you can have more money and that'll equate to a better life or more of this or more of that is just it's flawed because we really only have this one life, this one moment.
Yeah. And I mean, plenty of examples too where people have the money and they don't have the good life. I mean, so I think that whole notion that we've tied them so closely together and it's part of the problem, right? And like you said, like more stuff, stuff is, I think, a lot of times used too, because it's like if you have more stuff, the implication is you have more money, right? But it seems to be our only metric. And I think that's the other problem because people have this notion, like, of happiness being like, never feeling pain, always being, partying or whatever, always out doing whatever you want. No, and it's like, that's not really a life to begin with. And then on top of that, like, well, stuff's still going to happen that's bad. And so, how do you handle it? And how do you like, actually be happy then? Or is happiness not what we think it is? Is that the problem? Like, do we have a messed up notion
Yeah.
of it?
Yeah. Probably shouldn't be the goal, happiness.
Yeah. Well, because you see all these people with tons of money and all they do is try and get more money. Because it's like, it's like, and is
Hmm.
that, are you enjoying your life? Are you, is this like you've worked presumably hard to get where you are and have all this, but are you actually like enjoying it? Or is
Hmm.
now this just a new stress of now I have all this money and I need to keep making
And
all
now
these
they have
things
a bunch
work?
of time. So what are they supposed to do? All they know how to
Yeah,
do is make money.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah.
Well, yeah, I think happiness is the pursuit of happiness. Whoever wrote the Declaration of Independence is a moron. But
They're an idiot.
yeah, I don't
Yeah.
think that happiness is a good target because it's a transient feeling. You know?
Yeah, I don't know if it was always, that's the other thing. I don't know if it was always a feeling or like if it was, because like the good life too, I think is better sometimes to think in those
Hmm.
terms because it gives you a
Yeah.
broader notion of it instead of just like just happiness or something. And I wonder too, like if that's the problem, if like our notion of happiness has changed over time and that's why it's like not sufficient anymore. Like, because before maybe a happy life, I know like in ancient Greece, like eudaimonia, we translate that as happiness, but it really meant like a successful life, well-being, doing well, having friends. It was a kind of a broader concept that included more of the, what a person might need in a good life or what we might consider
Hmm.
a good life.
Yeah, and also we have too much time on our hands to think about it, and we're not exhausted enough. I think those two things are probably the biggest reasons why people are so concerned with happiness. Because like back in the day, you just worked the fields all day in the hope that you would make enough food to live through the next year. You
Yeah.
know, and you were exhausted at the end of every day, and it felt great to go to sleep because you were like, oh, I'm beat, and you were working towards maintaining your survival. So it gave you kind of like a goal to work towards. Whereas nowadays we're so disconnected from our survival, and we don't do any physical activity.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that. All right. So Karl Marx, one of the things he points out is that, with the modern economy, we don't we're not working towards our sustenance or to build things that we directly need. Like back in the day, like if you need something, you made it. You need a table, you made a table. You need food, you grow your food, right? You might trade with neighbors, you might do things to help each other out for basic survival within the community, but generally speaking, like you saw a direct correlation and relationship between your activities and your own well-being, right? The more you did, the more you had, direct correlation. Now we sell our labor, so we don't actually complete anything because we're only doing parts of stuff. And there's that alienation between ourselves and our sustenance because our labor doesn't buy us what we need to live, our money does. So there's this like disconnect between the things we're able to do and what we need to live, kind of in a way that's important, I think,
Hmm.
maybe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a huge one because there's just no connection. I see it when I walk into like the business district of town, and it's just like people are just so they're like zombies basically,
Yeah.
and they're just going to work. They're all dressed up nice, going to work and not smiling at all, not connected with anything at all, and yeah, totally miss the whole connection with life.
Well, it's kind of, yeah, it's a bummer, right? It's like, we get fixated on like doing these things and like you work with these companies, but you do such a small part. It feels like busy work. You don't even know what it contributes to, right? Or like, we get in our heads that if I just work hard enough and sacrifice all these other things, then I'll be happy. And like you give up doing all these things that you might have wanted to do, like seeing people, having stronger relationships, being actually in your community, going out in nature, all these things that like might better us broadly speaking, or in a way that's like not just maybe that's it. It's so narrow our focus of what success is and what a good life is that we've lost core aspects of humanity or something along the way.
Mm. and there are so many things competing with our attention. Like that's
Yeah.
just crazy. I look at
Yeah.
myself like I at least I deceive myself that I'm somewhat focused in terms of my attention. You
Yeah.
know, like I'm not on social media all the time. I do practice mindfulness and different things like that. So, but you know, you ask everybody, and everybody thinks they're more attractive than most people. So, like, probably
Yeah.
everybody thinks they have better attention. But it's just like everything vying for your attention. Like, I can't pick up my phone and not get distracted. It happens
Yeah.
every single time. I'll go to like write a note down in my phone, and then 5 minutes will go by. I forgot what the note was that I wanted to write down, and just totally distracted.
Yeah. Because you get notifications or there's something you think, oh, I should check this. It is. It's insane. It's like so distracting. And I think technology is like, well, I mean, I was just talking about this earlier this morning with somebody, but like, it's funny that like this change that's happened in society happened so quickly with technology that there's no way like we've caught up to it. Like in terms of like, dealing with it from an evolutionary standpoint, it takes time. Like it's so new that who knows what it's doing to our brains and like
Hmm.
whether or not we know how to like handle it in an appropriate or healthy way. So that's the other side of it too that's problematic. But yeah, the
Hmm.
distractions are everywhere. There's a disconnection that you feel in life. I think everybody feels that from stuff like feeling like disconnected and separated from things. And it's hard. And
Hmm.
yeah, I do. I blame a
So,
lot our notion of success though. But yeah, sorry.
yeah. Yeah. So here's an interesting part of the paradox of the good life is that there's a general concept that the good life is not what's here right now.
Hmm.
But what if it is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the other problem, right? Is that
Hmm.
we've been taught the good life is at the end of something and that you have to work towards it rather than, well, what if it's just now and this is it and you're missing it because you're not present?
Yeah. You hear all the old timers talking about the good old days. And I mean, every moment could be the best moment of your life. You never know.
Well, I think that's part of the problem too, is like instead of focusing on learning how to enjoy what we have and learning how to enjoy life now, we're constantly all focused on building some idea of a life in the future, which I don't, there's nothing wrong with having goals. I think that's a good thing to have. And, especially your own goals and your own values and working towards stuff, it makes life more fulfilling and purposeful and everything. But putting our happiness and our the quality of our life at the end of something is always problematic because we're not enjoying it now. Or maybe we're not doing things we should be doing now that would make us happier because we're focused on that and we think we need to do certain things. And there's that paradox there of like, well, what do I sacrifice now for that later?
Mhm. Yeah. I think maybe the ideal would be mixing of the both. Like there's a definition of a success by Earl Nightingale that I really like. He says it's the progressive realization of a worthy ideal.
Hmm.
So like when you're the it's actually the working towards a goal. So like
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
success, working towards a goal, having something you want to do and working towards it, that's success. And so if you can somehow mix that with contentment in the present, you got it made.
Yeah, yeah. I like that. I do, I am a kind of a firm believer that like, part of a good life and part of a successful life is having goals that you're trying to realize because you're trying to make yourself, right? And I think that is good. But I think that one of our major issues, and I know we both, have fallen into this too, is like that trap of thinking like it's all money, so I need to make more money. So then, putting all this time in now, and then, yeah, like you said, you're forgetting things that are otherwise important. So yeah, how do you combine those two? Being more
Mhm.
present, enjoying things, but also having goals that you're working towards that are worthwhile. Whew, it's hard.
Dude, I've been struggling with that recently. It's like, when can I start enjoying life? Like that's been my question I've been asking myself. Because it's like so long I've been focused on making money and somehow earning a better income so that whatever. And I've been putting off a whole bunch of things and
It
just
gets hard to
accumulating more
even
money.
define why you're doing it, though, right? It gets
Yeah.
hard to even
Mhm.
define what you're doing it for. And that's the crazy
And
part.
and I'm so afraid to stop
Yeah.
because I'm scared that if I stop, I'll lose it all.
Yeah.
Like it's just a giant house of cards, and if I stop, it'll just be all over.
It's so funny. I do often wonder like whether like, the people who like go off into like, monasteries and stuff were they not smart to just say forget it. Because
Yeah,
all of
right.
it's, just chasing your tail. It
Mm-hmm.
is funny. It's
Yeah.
gotten I think it has gotten a lot harder, now than it was in the past in terms of like we were talking about earlier, before we record, like how much you have to work just to get a job. Like how much you have to know now just to do something, right? How much you have to like
Right.
there's so much involved, like in switching careers in life, which we both are doing. Like it takes a lot of work. It's not easy to do. Nothing is
Mm-hmm.
like very simple. And I think everything's gotten harder because there is more information on everyone. There is more, awareness of a person's skill level and background and stuff is like readily available. So it's very difficult to move into something you might want to do and all and make, it takes a lot of work and that means sacrifice of things that you might want again or that you might enjoy in the moment. So it's like this catch 22.
Mm-hmm. And it's so hard because it is kind of a simple answer. Like I heard a senior monk saying how, like surviving isn't that hard. Like rice and beans are pretty cheap. So like surviving, not that hard. But like everything else in life comes down to controlling your mind.
Yeah.
And it's not it's not a complex solution. It's not like you have to do this and then this, but it's not easy at all either.
No. Well, that's the difficulty, right? It's like, it's like anyone, living in, a consumerist society, right? It's like you recognize you need something, like I need a car or something, right? Which you might need, like especially in the US, you definitely need a car. But then the question is, well, which one do you get? How much are you going to spend? And then like these things, like it's like, do I need just a vehicle that goes from point A to point B, or do I need something with leather and with 47 TVs? It's like, and I think that's the other problem is like we get caught up in thinking we have to have the best one of everything, whatever that, is at the moment. And so that's more work and more time that you're investing now because you're putting yourself in debt. It's like, yeah, it's very difficult.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I guess how does one attain the good life?
Yeah, it's
How,
a tough
didn't they
one, isn't
figure
it?
that out a long time ago?
Well, everybody thinks they did, right? Everybody thinks they figure it out. That's the problem. Uh, I mean, I do think like the ancients were right in the sense that like you have to have values that matter to you. You do have to work on character because I think you carry yourself into every moment. So if you don't work on yourself, like you'll never have that control or self-control to like make choices that are, you know, ones that are really things that you want. You'll be led by other things like desires and stuff rather than making choices for yourself or a good life or being able to evaluate things. So having your own values is important and recognizing that. But yeah, it's hard. It's really hard to stay present too sometimes. It's so easy too to take things for granted and just miss, enjoying what we already have. And that's the
Hmm.
thing we all do, I think, too, which is kind of problematic.
Totally, totally. I mentioned to you last week about the exercise I've been doing when I'm not present. Is just like looking at five things I can see, four things I can hear, three things I can feel,
Oh
two I can
yeah.
smell, and one I can taste, just to like bring me back into the actual present experience. And every time I do that, I'm so blown away how far outside of the present experience I was.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it? You can be totally disconnected from your body in a way. It's like weird, where like you don't even know what's going on.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
just in a
It,
different world.
I think that's it. I think, unfortunately, I think the truth too is it's like mindfulness. Like you need to be mindful when you're acting and present. And like part of that is being, aware of yourself and your body and everything. And just we aren't. We're distracted as hell all the time.
I keep looking for another answer other than
I
mindfulness.
know.
Like
It's
it's
like
like the answer always comes back to that. And I'm like, but it's got to be something else. Maybe if I read another
gotta
book,
be.
there'll be
Yeah.
another answer.
Somebody else is something better.
I
It's
know.
the truth though. It's funny, but it's like, yeah, I think that is true though. I think it's the only way to be present. And like you said, like how many books there are about like getting the flow state for work or doing it, and 90% of them
Oh
are about
God. Who
basically,
references Mikhailchiowski or
yeah.
whatever his name is?
And
Jeez. Yeah.
it's so funny because even that, like that flow state is all about like not really being present. Like you're so involved in your work that you totally black out everything else. And you're just like, like
Yeah.
unaware of the time, unaware of what's going on around you. And it's like, is that really better? Like,
Mm,
yeah, it's definitely good for productivity, I think, and creativity sometimes. But like,
yeah.
yeah, it's funny.
No,
I don't
people
know.
people worship the flow state.
I know. I see it all the time. It's so
I
funny.
think it's just because it's one of those times when you're not worrying, oh, is my life good enough? Why do I feel this way? Why aren't I happier? You
Yeah.
don't question that stuff when you're in a flow state. That's probably why.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem with being present too sometimes. Is like being present is like, I think that's our other issue is like, if we're not, we have to also face the discomfort, all those things. And I think that's the other paradox is like, to enjoy the things in the moment, you also have to like deal with things, right? And you also have to like address things and make it so that you can enjoy the moment. I think that's also hard because we're so used to distracting ourselves and we're so used to running away from things rather than facing them that it makes it difficult to even enjoy the moment. And it's easier to say, well, I'm working towards X, Y, or Z.
Yeah. And life has gotten so comfortable that any discomfort we just want out
Yeah,
immediately.
immediately. Yeah,
Yeah. Cool. So the good life.
it is paradoxical. I think our
It
definition is
is.
just bad too. I think happiness is not a good one to focus on.
Oh, it's not a good life. Yeah. Not a good
Yeah.
life. I hate when people ask, "Are you happy?" And I was like, "I was until you asked." Thank
Yeah.
you.
I mean, I think it's definitely like I think happy moments are definitely a part of it. You should have joy and you should have happiness as part of your good life, right? But like to
Hmm.
think it's all going to be that way, it just seems ridiculous to me.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
I'm good with
paradoxical
that.
though.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Hmm.
Well, there you go. The paradox of a good life. Please check us out wherever you get your podcasts. Watch us on YouTube. Please like, share, subscribe. That helps us out a lot. We will be back later this week with a quick fix. This is the Existential Stoic Podcast. I'm Danny. That's Randy. Later, Randy.
Later, Danny.